In April 2010, 9-year-old Anthony Njiriwa went missing from his home in Dagoretti, Nairobi. Weeks passed, but the family had no information concerning their son or whatever had befallen him. While they were still in mixed feelings of shock, terror, and hope, a note arrived at their home which demanded an amount to be paid as ransom for the safe return of their son Anthony. As per the instructions, the money was to be sent to a certain number through a Kenyan money transfer service, M-Pesa. Since the family was financially stable, they went ahead and did so. Unbeknownst to the kidnappers, the money was being tracked through the service by the police. Sadly, the family's hope of the safe return of Anthony was cut short in the first week of June 2010 when the heavily decomposing body of the youngster was found. This was nearly 2 months after he had disappeared, and it was clearly showing that Anthony had already been killed by the time the kidnappers were demanding for ransom. As shocking and devastating as the discovery was, the family had a small relief since the perpetrator of the crime, Philip Onyanja, was already in police custody. What the police didn't know at the time is that they had arrested a serial killer who, according to his confession, was out for the blood of 100 people and had already claimed lives of 17. Welcome to the Insight Edition with Maxwell Shakwila, and on today's episode of Criminal Diaries, we're going to look deep in the case of Philip Onyanja, a man who is up to date referred to as Kenya's most prolific serial killer. Philip Onyanja was arrested by the police on the 5th of June 2010 after most of the elites were pointing towards him while they were investigating the kidnapping case of the 9-year-old Anthony Njiriwa Mwiruri. Safaricom data records enabled the police to track the ransom money sent to Anthony's kidnappers. When they found Philip, they discovered that the ransom note that was left at Anthony's home earlier on was handwritten by Philip Onyanja himself. Onyanja would later shock the whole nation by confessing to the murders of 17 people. After his confession, many were eager to know who Philip Onyanja was and how he ended up committing such crimes. Philip hails from Western Kenya, where he was born in the year 1978. He was among the several children of Samuel Onyanja and Esther Onyanja. They owned a tea farm near Kericho, which they still tend to up to date. Not much is known about his early years, but it is important to note that Philip claims his childhood was filled with a lot of accidents, and that a worker at his home was molesting him during his early adulthood years. Something that he claims messed with his psychology in a manner which he started thinking that with force he could get whatever he wanted. Philip also claimed that he was struggling with porn addiction. Philip showed a lot of potential in his primary school days. He worked hard enough to attain good grades and was even described as a well-behaved boy whose ability was beyond control. Once he concluded primary education, he was admitted to Kenyatta Mahiga High School in Nyeri, almost 400 kilometers away from his home. Onyanja finished his Form 1 smoothly. It was in his second year in high school when his troubles began. This was after his promotion to Form 2. Onyanja started bullying his younger classmates, and a Form 1 student accused him of sodomy. These accusations would lead to him getting suspended from school for 2 weeks. Philip Onyanja was never the same when he returned to school after his suspension. His teachers watched him spiral into a pale shadow of himself. The once very hardworking young man started to struggle to apply himself in his academic work, and even the teachers had to force him to concentrate in class. The school didn't stop experiencing issues with Onyanja till he was done with his Form 4. It is said that he grew more twitchy and very quick to anger. Philip concluded his secondary education in 1998 when he sat for his final exams at Kenyatta Mahiga, where he attained a grade of C-. Onyanja's refusal to pick up his certificate from the school would be enough evidence to show that he wasn't satisfied with the result, so he enrolled in another school and redid exams. Philip's quench for education seems to have dried there, as he never got himself admitted to any college or university for further studies. Instead, he chose to venture into the workforce, where he got himself employed as a security guard for G4S, a global security firm based in London. Due to his work, Onyanja often moved around to guard various companies and even private residences. One of these transfers landed him in Nyeri in the mid-2000s, where he would meet Lydia Nyaboke, and the two would later get married in the same year and relocate to Nairobi. Philip and Lydia stayed in a small one-bedroom house in the city, and the year 2008 they welcomed a son. 1 year later, in 2009, Onyancha started to show some really strange behaviors which would make his wife grow suspicious of him. For example, he started to spend a lot of time out and even staying out very late and hanging out with unknown acquaintances. Eventually she called him out, but Philip would insist that nothing was wrong. His commitment to his wife was still there, and he continued providing for his small family. At the time, his neighbors described him as a seemingly normal guy who would randomly do some strange stuff. One time, Philip turned off the main power breaker to the whole neighborhood, and when his neighbors complained, he threatened to hire someone to kill them all. This will make them unable to complain about any other annoying thing he will do later on, like playing music very loud in the night hours. On the 2nd of November 2008, Catherine Chelangat, a 32-year-old mother of one, who had just finished college at Kabete Technical Institution, disappeared without a trace. Catherine used to live in Karen, a suburb of Nairobi, where she was lucky to have some family members living nearby. On that particular day, she had gone to visit one of her relatives who went by the name Wesley Rotich, and she left at 9 p.m. at the night after informing him that she was going to spend the night at her brother's place. Wesley wouldn't have let her leave his premises if he had just a glimpse of what was coming shortly, as this will be the last time he would hear from or see Catherine alive. Catherine never appeared at her brother's place, and in the days that followed, worried friends and family tried to retrace her steps in attempts to find her, but all was in vain. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. 3 months later, the family received a phone call from the captures, and they were demanding a sum of 30,000 shillings, which is equivalent to $241 to be paid in ransom. They pleaded with the captures to reduce the amount, which they succeeded to bring down to 15,000 shillings, which is equivalent to $120. They also requested to be given time to raise the money and pay up. They proceeded to report the occurrence to the police at Karen. True to their words, the family proceeded to make the payments, and sadly, Catherine never returned. They would discover 2 years later that she was already dead by the time the captures was asking for ransom. This discovery was done in 2010 after Onyancha's arrest and confession. Skip forward to 2009. At around the same time, Onyancha's wife had started growing suspicious of him. Samuel Wanyonyi, a boy who had come to Nairobi to study and was staying with his aunt, went missing. Sadly, he had just stayed for only 3 months when this happened. Search parties were formed in an attempt to find him. And guess who was on the front line? Yes, Philip Onyancha himself. Most perpetrators pretend to help in the investigations to ensure that they are a step ahead and no one suspects them. 3 days into their disappearance, a note was left at his aunt's doorstep demanding 40,000 shillings, an equivalent of $322 to be paid as ransom through M-Pesa. When Samuel Wanyonyi's family declined to respond, a second letter arrived at their premises. This time, the money had been reduced to 10,000 shillings, equivalent to $80.50. The second letter came with one of the clothing Wanyonyi was wearing when he disappeared, but still, the family declined to pay. Onwards, the letters stopped coming, and the harassing phone calls, which were tormenting the family to pay up, were also stopped.
Moving forward to January 2010, the body of Helen Nyambura, a commercial sex worker, was found in a room at the Rwambogo Bar and Restaurant in Thika, an industrial town that is about 1 hour north of Nairobi. The cause of her death was ruled out by the police to be an epileptic shock. Just a week after this discovery, another similar crime happened in a different area of Thika. Jacqueline Wambui, a 25-year-old young lady, met up with a client on the 2nd of February 2010. The two headed to a lodging house which was mostly known for sex work, and just a day later, her body was found naked and with her neck broken. Sadly, 6 more commercial sex workers were killed by Onyancha in 2010 at Thika before he was arrested for an unrelated case. Throughout the 8 murders, the police could only trace the victims to particular places and times. Solving these crimes became impossible for them since they had a seemingly random nature. Some of the known victims of Onyancha include Helen Nyambura, Jacqueline Wambui, Catherine Chelengat, 9-year-old Anthony Njeriwa Mwiruri, 9-year-old Metan Barasa, and Samuel Wanyonyi. Most of the bodies he had helped the police find could not be identified, thus their details were unknown.
The kidnapping case of 9-year-old Anthony Njeriwa Mwiruri led to the arrest of Philip Onyanja and his two accomplices, Tobias Aradi and Douglas Obiero, on the 5th of June 2010. Within just a single day of the arrest, Onyanja confessed to the murder of 17 people, all being women and children, whom he described as weak and vulnerable to his attack. After confessing, Philip led investigators on a tour of all the crime scenes and places where he had hidden the bodies. During this exercise, 4 bodies were found. That's including the remains of Catherine Chelengat, which Onyanja had put in a woven sack and hidden in a roof of the Nairobi Water and Sewage Company for over 2 years by the time of discovery. In addition to finding the bodies, Onyanja also gave the investigators key information on various unsolved murder cases. He not only claimed responsibility for the murders of Helen Nyambura and Jacqueline Wambui, which had occurred in Thika, but also took the investigators to the cheap, dirty rooms where their bodies had been found. There are reports which say that Philip Onyanja could describe a crime as if it has just happened whenever they were at a crime scene. After all the tours and confessions, Onyanja was challenged with the question of why or what had led him to do what he had done. And in his soft-spoken casual demeanor, he told them that he killed those people because he had been initiated in a cult back when he was in high school at Kenyatta Mahiga and was given a task of killing 100 people, and when he was done, he will be blessed with a lot of wealth. Onyanja claims that he was initiated into the cult during his second year at Kenyatta Mahiga by a lady teacher who also administered an oath to him. Her name was Elizabeth Wambui Kimani. Due to the determination of the police to know more about the cult claims that Onyanja was making and also prevent this whole thing from happening all over again, Elizabeth Wambui, the teacher, was arrested by the police in June 2010. By then, she was 40 years old. She had been a Christian religious education teacher at Kenyatta Mahiga between 1995 and 1997, and this had been Onyanja's first few years at the school. She transferred to Thika, where she taught at Karuri High School from 1998 to July 2002. Elizabeth seems to have had a pretty quiet life. That's until she got arrested by the police just days after Onyanja had been arrested. She was held in custody for 2 weeks before being charged with any crimes. Elizabeth Wambui was first arraigned in court on the 24th of June 2010 and charged with the crime of administering an unlawful oath to Philip Onyanja. Prosecutors were weighing more charges. Unsurprisingly, she denied all charges and asked to be released on bail, but her plea was denied by Kibera Law Court Senior Principal Magistrate Grace Nzioka, who told her that the offense was unbailable. Contrastingly, Onyanja continued to give out more details of how, as a teenager back in high school, his teacher Elizabeth developed an unhealthy obsession with him. She would welcome him to her house where she offered him food and drinks which he claims were laced with some unknown ingredients and concoctions which he says drugged him. Onyanja claims that one time Elizabeth lacerated his chest, took some of his blood out, and in return she put some black powder that looked like ash on the open wound. Onyanja stated that after this, Elizabeth could take control over him through black magic and she was the one commanding him to commit the murders. Investigators claim that on her side, Elizabeth Wambui was not cooperative. She seemed combative and even denied knowing Onyanja entirely. Over the next year, Elizabeth Wambui remained in custody. A trial began in September 2011. Onyanja surprisingly testified that all his claims against Elizabeth Wambui were false. Since he was the only key witness, Wambui was acquitted of all the charges against her. On the other side of Onyanja and his accomplices, the investigation was said to continue for years, since this type of serial killer case was kind of complicated. In the same year, 2010 later on, Philip Onyanja was sentenced to 12 years in prison after being found guilty of attempted rape and assault of a woman. This was entirely a different case from his murder charges. Onyanja was to serve his sentence in a maximum security facility because of his circumstances. The prosecution continued to build up their case against Onyanja and his associates over the next several years. In Kamiti Maximum Prison, Onyanja started working towards becoming a preacher, a work he was looking forward to doing after his release from prison. However, a mental evaluation conducted on Philip Onyanja in 2014 showed that he would still be a threat to the community if he is ever released. In 2018, following his case, things took a wild turn that left many Kenyans in shock. High Court Justice James Wakiga ordered a brand new trial for Onyanja, citing that the previous rulings against him in 2010 were mistrials. Justice Wakiga stated that Philip Onyanja should have been tried under Section 162 on Kenya's Criminal Procedure Code, instead of Section 166. Section 162 dealt directly with those who were suffering from mental illness, and carried with it different sentencing guidelines, procedures, and more. The justice also found that the prosecution had over the years tried to suppress mental health findings, thus ensuring that the case against Onyanja would proceed as planned. The case was then forwarded to a head of criminal divisions, where it arrived at the desk of Justice Jesse Lesit. It remains there as Philip Onyanja and his associates continue to await trial.